Thank you very much.
Where did Jim go?
It's right there.
Oh.
So tall.
Everything. It's warm. Did you say it's warm? Oh my god, it's so hot. By the end of the meeting, I'm like, where to go?
No, it's just so big. It was fun when you were
Oh, yeah.
Well, not on that specifically, if
It's like movie references and I was like, I remember Ace Ventura too, where he's like, sure is hot and these rhinos.
Oh, I love those movies. Jess doesn't want me to show those things. Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura, yeah.
I used to laugh so hard in high school. Oh, and Living Color is amazing.
So it goes like bright red.
I know. It's so
And
funny.
then it goes to purple and purple.
Are we ready? Okay, board members, it is 7:02, so I will call the meeting to order. If we could please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 23rd, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting of the Milford Board of Education. Ms. Griffin, can we have a roll call, please?
Catherine Ailing.
Here.
Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Una Petrowski.
Here.
Betsy Ratner.
Here.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Ms. Boynton is traveling and she has to be excused.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
9 members present.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Parent Involvement Report, the annual Parent Involvement Report. I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Kutaya.
Sorry,
That's okay.
we're just consulting on the agenda. Yes, thank you, board members. We do have the annual parent involvement report that we will share with you with Dr. Fedigan, Dr. Gillespie, and Mr. Smith's help. So I'll turn things over to them.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. I'm so grateful to have with us tonight Dr. Gillespie and Sean Smith. I think you do know that they lead the work of student development and wellness, pre-K-12 in our school system, or as we say, preschool through grade 12, with Mr. Smith taking the lead preschool through grade 5, and Dr. Gillespie in grades, working with students and staff in grades 6 through 12. So tonight, this is always a celebratory presentation and share with the Board of Education because we have the opportunity to share highlights of our work to engage students and their families in our greater school community and I guess district community, right, at large, the city of Milford. So you're going to see so many highlights. They'll bring you through some of the challenges, I think, as you've known and experienced them yourselves as board members and parents. And we'll also be able to share how, when some of the restrictions lightened or changed, we were able to shift some of our practice throughout this year and support increased different levels of community engagement. And then finally, they're going to share with us some lessons learned in these last year, really even 2 years of engaging families in different ways and some things that we'll look forward to carrying with us in our work ahead into the future. So I will turn things over to Mr. Smith and Dr. Gillespie. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Dr. Fedigan. Good evening, board members. I think I've met most of you, but my name is Sean Smith. I'm the supervisor of student development and wellness for pre-K through 5. Here with my partner.
Hi, I'm Christine Gillespie, and I am the supervisor for grades 6 through 12.
Dr. Gillespie and I started thinking about this presentation, and we started reflecting on what this past year has been like. If you remember, I was here, for those of you who were here a year ago, with Annalise Faziano back in February of 2021, and we did this report. And we had to think back, like, okay, well, wait a minute, what was our school world like in February of 2021, which was just a year ago, right? And we were in school 4 days a week at the time, not 5, and we were on shortened days. So we had to kind of recalibrate our head and say, okay, well, what was parent engagement like during that time, and what was the environment like during that time? So we decided to organize this presentation by time so that we could think of it in those terms. So back in the spring of 2021, after we gave our last presentation, it was March 17th when we moved to full days in Milford Public Schools. And then it was, March 10th when we moved to 5 days a week. And then May 10th when we moved to full days. And if you remember, at the time, we had in-person learners and we had remote learners. So it was a very different environment than we see today. We also had cohorts, so we weren't mixing kids as much as possible. We were keeping them together for our COVID mitigation strategies. We had masks and 6-foot distancing, which was true throughout. And contact tracing, testing, and quarantines were a large part of our life back then. So at that time, most of our events accordingly were virtual. We still had a lot of events, right? We tried to still have as many events as we could, but they had to be virtual due to the circumstances. But we did have as many in-person events as we possibly could. So one of the virtual events that we had was drama productions last year. So when we went to do plays, we couldn't do them because we couldn't have audiences, so we had to have them virtually. But that was how we engaged families at the time. Virtual Raising Readers program was another virtual event that we had. This was through the Community Connection Center housed at Pumpkin Delight at the time. And what this is a parent reading group where parents learn how to read with their children, how to select books, how to ask them the right questions. And it's one of the ways that we engage the families of our youngest learners and get them off on the road to loving reading.
We also looked for creative and innovative ways to reimagine many of the in-person events that we typically had that were for students. One of them being the virtual 8th grade parent open house, the sessions that we had for 8th graders who were going to the high school the next year. Also things like our annual art show last year was a virtual art show. A highlight was definitely all of the virtual ceremonies that for the second year in a row took place across levels and across schools. And I know that for many families, this was a wonderful keepsake, a very nice experience that really was a bright spot in a lot of changing times. It also started many new traditions. We had to reimagine senior nights, and this was the highlight of having fans again in person for spring sports, being able to honor our senior athletes. So the spring of 21 was the real first taste of normalcy for for our families, being able to attend sporting events. We also had drive-by moving up ceremonies. This one is particularly from Meadowside. And we also had, very exciting, a socially distanced graduation with all graduates on the field for our high schools.
So one of the things that we often share at this report is our school climate survey. So the school climate survey is given each spring, and the purpose is to assess where we are in terms of climate at each school, gauge our growth and our progress, and make adjustments to any areas that we see that need growth. Over the last 2 years, we've had to change our school climate survey drastically because our environment was changed drastically. Some of the statements just didn't make sense. So in 2021, to say I feel comfortable I feel welcome in my child's school when we couldn't allow you in your child's school by health measures wouldn't make sense. But we had a lot of things that we were concerned about in terms of family well-being and student well-being. So we changed the questions on the survey for the last 2 years so that we would get the information that we needed to best serve our community. It wasn't the typical family engagement or parent involvement questions that we had, but they were the questions that we needed answered at the time. So one question on there that relates to family engagement was around the family level of stress. And The question was, what level of stress is your family experiencing in this school year? Remember, it wasn't this school year, this was for last spring. And 27% of our families said that the stress in the home was worse or much worse than expected. That's a pretty high number, although the year before, the year where COVID started and we went to full distance learning, it was 39% at that time. So it was less last year than it was the previous year. Looking down, one of the questions is, tell us the prevailing mood of your child. And the options are happy, content, sad, anxious, or bored. And 50% of our parents said the prevailing mood of their child was sad, anxious, or bored. That's a really, really high number, and a startling statistic to us. And it gave us the information that we already had the idea of, that we had to do a lot of work with our students in terms of their emotional well-being at the time. And although that number is high, the year before it was 66%. So 50% was actually less than the previous year. In terms of interaction, you can see their child's social interaction. 81% of our parents said that their social interaction last school year was less or much less than typical. Another really startling number, very, very high. Makes sense given the circumstances that we had. And then the next question was, we asked parents, where do you need more support with parenting? And 57% of our parents said that they needed more support helping their students with academics and behaviors. And that was another statistic that the year before was 66%. So those numbers got a little better last year, but they weren't strong by any means. They were alarming, but they provided us with information that we needed so we could take actions based on those. And what were some of the actions that we took? So for one, we added 11 new school counselors. That addition wasn't based solely on this survey results, but it was needed, and it was really perfect timing to add 11 new school counselors to our school district. We had these 11 wonderful people that Dr. Gillespie and I worked with firsthand that really made a difference in our schools for all of our children and for our children who were struggling. They created a comprehensive school counseling curriculum at the elementary level, and they were able to counsel more students at the elementary and the middle school level. We also revised our morning meeting and our advisory lessons in school to focus on the challenges that I just shared with you.
We went ahead and added Wingman programming to all of our middle schools, as well as provided ongoing training to our staffs on trauma-informed practices, and that occurred last spring as well as throughout this whole school year as a series of events. Offered additional professional learning to staff on restorative practices and social emotional learning. Our schools held math and literacy academic workshops for parents, and we also really based the parent universities that were offered based on this data.
Last summer when we got together and we planned the professional learning that we did for staff, we got as many staff trained as possible on trauma-informed practices because we knew about what the situation was coming back to school based on this survey and based on our experience.
In addition, the survey gave us some more information, which gave us additional insights. These are more of the typical indicators that appear on the climate survey each year. And we saw very positive numbers in responses, and there were many improvements over the prior year survey data. In terms of communication, 91% of our families said that schools communicated effectively with families, which was a great affirmation of the hard and intense work that went on throughout the year at all levels, just to make sure that communication was clear and timely. And that was over the year prior, 86%, so even the year before that, looking at families feeling that there was strong communication there. In addition to safety and well-being being the priority this year, this was the strongest response ever that we've received from families at 89%, feeling that that was a priority of the district. So, and then also the 79% felt that their child's teacher helped them understand how they could support their child's learning at home. And having been one of those parents also at home during this time, we all lived through this experience of what it truly meant to assist our child at home and to have our teachers assist with that process. Not an easy task at all. And again, a marked improvement over the prior year, where the responses were around 66%. And the idea that schools help students and families learn strategies to understand and manage their emotions during the school year. So emotional regulation being rated at 81%, which again was one of the hallmarks of the year and one of the true goals of all interactions with students, to be able to help address those concerns that parents noted in the earlier part of the survey.
I was pleased to see those numbers. We hear it from Dr. Kataya and Dr. Fedigan all the time, especially during COVID, right? Safety first, but relationships first, right? And we see that in those numbers in terms of safety and emotional regulation. That those two things being a priority in the district, the proof is in the pudding, and it's right here that that's really something we focused on, and we see the fruits of that labor.
So moving into summer of 2021 was where it was a nice, quieter time. Our COVID numbers were lower, things were fluctuating a little bit, and restrictions were continuing. However, we kept asking ourselves, how can we continue to bring students together and support our families? And so the masks and social distancing continued, but the focus was, what activities could we offer? And so we looked at opportunities through summer school. That's okay. Play dates for our youngest learners, making as many transition activities be in person, and also continuing with food support for our community.
So we had to look at things differently. This is a picture. We're going to show you guys a lot of pictures and try to tell our story through pictures. This is a picture of summer school last year. It's very different than what we typically see as summer school. And the reason was we didn't select students based on their academic need. We changed things. We selected students. We opened it up to everybody because we figured whoever needed social support would sign up, and we welcomed them in. And we also changed it. Instead of having a 5-week program, we made it 2 weeks, 3 2-week sessions, so families could sign up for one session and not the next session. They could still take their family vacation. We wanted to make it as flexible as possible so we could get students as much social interaction as possible. And you also see we have a high schooler here. We wanted our high schoolers to get out and get social as much as possible, so we involved them and made them like summer school counters at our summer schools last year. Sorry, there's a delay on this clicker. So here's just another picture of kids having fun during summer school, making like shark faces. Here's another example of summer school class. I believe this is at Horn. Is that right, Dr. Gillespie?
Yes, in our tech area, as well as in one of the culinary classrooms.
We tried to offer a variety of opportunities, again, that weren't just academically based, but for the kids to get together and have fun. This is a group of high school students playing badminton during summer school.
A strong emphasis was on movement and also providing as much social interaction as possible.
Yeah, 2 things that were missing during the pandemic. Another thing I want to point out is that we started a new partnership at the end of the summer and heading into the fall, and that was with the Family Resource Center and the Community Connection Center. So now the Family Resource Center and the Community Connection Center, they have similar goals, right? They're trying to support the families of the students in district. The Family Resource Center was always focused in their target audience is preschool students, so birth through age 5. Whereas the Community Connection Center, their target audience is students of school age, so grades K through 12. And it was a real natural partnership, and under the direction of Liz Gaffney, who's our early childhood coordinator, her and I partnered with both organizations to come together, and it's really been a nice connection. They do a variety of things, I think you guys are aware, but I'll mention a couple of them. So they provide families with resources for wraparound services that they may need. They do home visits. They work with families to help in a variety of ways to help their children behaviorally, emotionally, and academically. And they've served quite a few families. So the Family Resource Center has served 43 families and 53 children this year, which is terrific. And the Community Connection Center has served 36 families, and their most recent endeavor is the Family Music Nights you may have seen advertised, and they've had 45 families show up for those. So that's been a nice turnout. Another priority during the summer of last year was food security, and this continued. It started, during the pandemic when food was harder to come by and people were losing their jobs and the economy was struggling. It remained a priority last summer, and Eileen Faustich, our food services manager, who's phenomenal, served 30,968 meals last summer. That's an amazing number to me. In Milford, Connecticut, she served 30,968 meals. And that was over the course of 4 weeks. So that was really beneficial to our community.
We were also incredibly excited to be able to start bringing in and bringing back some of our events, and it was a priority. And it really started with being able to hold our traditional orientations. So big highlight was in-person 9th grade orientations to kick off the start back to school, which leads us to really taking us into the fall of 2021, where we had full days of school. There were still restrictions in place, but we were not having students on remote learning, which took a little bit of adjusting for some of our students. There were masks, there was 6-foot distancing, and our schools were still involved with contact tracing and dealing with students testing and quarantines, so it was still a bit of a stressful time, not completely back to normal. But there was great joy around the idea of outdoor concerts, the return to traditional fall athletic events for our upper grades, outdoor costume parades for our little ones, still having some of the flexibility though with virtual open house, and as well as virtual parent workshops, as we still had indoor restrictions that were in place.
In the fall, you start to see ways where we could come together more in person. And that's why I think the timeline is a good way to tell this story, because you see the interactions being less and less restricted and us being able to offer more and more in-person activities, although it be outside, right? So this is a 5th grade music celebration, but outdoors, which from what I heard was really enjoyed by all, and it was fun being outdoors for musicians. This is one of elementary school's favorite activities, the annual costume parade. And you can see the parents lined up by the trees outside. So parents were able to come back in and attend these events, which was, for us at the time, was really a huge step forward compared to where we were. So we really appreciated that. Some things still remain virtual, like open houses, because we still couldn't have that many people indoors. Also, we read the statistics before, and we wanted to give parents more of that support academically. So we started having parent workshops again, but they had to be virtual because we couldn't have all those parents indoors. This is just a screenshot of Mrs. Croyce's command station during a math night with her PTA. So she had 3 different sessions running, 9 teachers running the sessions, 1 amazing PTA group, and 81 super busy Meadowside mathematicians at home. So all of them stepped up at night to really support their students academically. Another way that we engaged families virtually was, this is an example at JFK, they did some STEM home activities. So this is Mr. Sabo, who's their STEM teacher, and Mrs. Apicella, who's one of their coaches, right? And who was focused on math in the past. They got together and they had a home activity where kids learned how to do an experiment where they could blow up a balloon with chemicals. So that was a neat way to engage the kids at home.
We also returned to more traditional things occurring at our athletic events, such as the halftime show. In addition to some more of the technical things that needed to happen for managing this period was the distribution of COVID test kits, which our schools and our staff assisted with, which was a very, very large undertaking, but done incredibly quickly. And that led us into the winter of transitioning from 2021 into 2022. And it was very exciting with switching to mask optional on February 28th. Started with 6-foot distancing, but those requirements were removed as of March 14th. So this was a period, winter, and it's so recent, but yet feels so far away, as Mr. Smith and I reflected on this, that it was very hard for us to imagine that this was only weeks ago, not a year ago even. It feels much longer. And so many more of the traditional events coming back and being held in person, although some of them still occurring virtually, such as celebrating Read Across America Week, which is a very popular week for events in our in our elementary schools for our students. And there were many opportunities for families to participate at home with their children. And so many of those videos of families reading together were sent into schools, as well as virtual workshops where families were held, because it's one of the lessons we've learned that virtual is sometimes a very effective way to engage with our families. We also had a lot of fun with Frosty Fest in partnership with the Milford Prevention Council. And it was organized by the Milford Prevention Council and encouraged in our schools. And with a donation, they were able to decorate a Frosty on the Milford Green. And as Mr. Smith mentioned before, we planned our Parent University offerings this year very deliberately to respond to the needs that arose from the survey. So our December Parent University was a virtual offering that was sent out to all families, and it was a video put together by our West Shore staff. And it was around supporting children with anxiety and depression, and really targeted towards a group that we knew was struggling, and we wanted to provide parents of all levels with resources, and felt that our middle school staff was the most appropriately positioned to give us a wide lens for that work.
An interesting program that we started in the winter also, Rick Rausi started this program that partnerships with UConn called the PEP program, People Empowering People. And this program focuses on developing personal, family, and civic leadership skills. So it's a parent leadership program, a whole new way to engage families. He has 2 cohorts going, and both cohorts sold out pretty quickly, and he has a waiting list. So parents are interested in this sort of thing. And from all accounts from Mr. Rausi, it's been going really well so far. We also had some of our more traditional events happening in the winter. This was Milford Fire Department visit to kindergarten, always a favorite at the elementary schools. And this is not a picture of an event or really parent engagement, but I liked it because it shows kids working together and being close to each other and having fun and smiling and being able to see smiles, right? When those masks came off, and you could see those smiles in classrooms, like what a gift that was. All right, so spring of 2022. Things really started to open up this spring. It's been the most normal or typical conditions that we've seen in over 2 years. Masks were been optional all spring, no social distancing. As of March 28th, visitors can now access schools and field trips return. So we feel like we're getting to a more typical environment of school, and it's great because we can really start to plan and do more things that we're used to. Parent universities, school dances, award ceremonies, all in person. The question was in our minds constantly, well, can we do that in person? Does it have to be virtual? How can we get more parents involved? Now we can actually bring people together. This is a picture from Meadowside Elementary School, and this was their first parent reader in 2 years. what's typically a regular occurrence in our elementary schools.
So it's definitely my favorite picture
Yeah.
of all of ours.
I've mentioned before, the Community Connection Center did family music nights. This is Liz McNichol. She's a local performer. She's from Ireland, and has a fabulous voice, and she's fabulous with kids. We're running a series of music events for families with that, and this is a picture of that.
We were also excited that all of this happened in time to celebrate Teacher Appreciation Week. So our PTAs were able to engage in our schools to celebrate our teachers. And there was also an in-person paint night. This is a picture from JFK of our students hard at work. And it was a real nice return for our drama productions to be in person this year. This is a picture of a National Honor Society induction ceremony, which was greatly reimagined during the pandemic, and something that was really a nice experience is for families to be able to all be in one space and experience with the students. We also had virtual author visits, making sure to capitalize on the things that we've learned throughout the pandemic to be able to offer the opportunity for someone who's not able to come join us in person, and for that to be a very valuable, rich experience for our students. We also held an in-person parent university event and really designed to respond to those survey results, but really targeting two different sets of audiences so we could really provide something that was meant for our pre-K-12 families. So it's focusing on supporting social emotional growth for our elementary families, as well as teen mental health for our secondary families. Because again, from the survey results, as well as just from the goings-on every day in our buildings, this was what we felt families were really looking and asking for. So this was an in-person event that even included dinner. So we were very excited to be able to welcome families back together across the district.
Dr. Gillespie and I both attended that parent university and sat with families and talked to them about the challenges that they had faced over the last couple of years, and they were very grateful to have a venue where they could learn about and talk about being able to overcome those challenges in their households with their children. It was a really powerful event. So we also were able to continue this spring some traditional events, like this is just an advertisement for Mathewson Spring Dance. I think all of our elementary schools are having spring dances this spring, which was not even thinkable a year ago. This is the next parent university we have coming up, Read Some More. Read Some More. So this is an early literacy as well as a kickoff to summer reading. So again, going back to those survey results, right? Parents wanting more academic support. This is in partnership with the Milford Public Library. We're going to invite parents in of our early readers to come in and learn how they can really motivate their students to read over the summer, give them book suggestions, do some read alouds, teach them how to read with their kids, and give them a chance to visit the library and get engaged with that awesome resource in our community so that they can take that forward into the summer. This is a flyer for another event on June 14th, kickoff to summer, and this is in partnership with the Community Connection Center and the Family Resource Center. This is an event where we're inviting all of our families to come to Pumpkin Delight. We're going to have a food truck. We're going to have ice cream. It's going to be like a social event. There's also going to be tables with all community providers there to give families some resources to work with over the summer. And then Liz McNichols is going to perform for the second hour there as well. So that's going to be a really nice event to get us started into summer. Some of the other events, we're not going to give you pictures of all of them, but things coming up, the prom, different award ceremonies. We were just at a wonderful one for Teacher of the Year, Parent of the Year, and Para of the Year. It's so nice to hear all those positive stories. sitting together with people from our community that we haven't been able to do for such a long time. Moving up ceremonies can be more in person, field days are coming back, 5th grade celebrations, and Dr. Gillespie and I are writing and getting out another school climate survey right now. Again, we're looking at a year that was atypical, but we want to start getting back as much typical data as we can, so how do we balance that moving forward? So that's the timeline, 1 year ago to today. And what have we learned in that time in terms of family engagement? So one thing we've learned is that, you know, we're really grateful to be back in person, as we were just sharing. We love having all these traditional events and seeing people face to face. But we can't ignore some of the opportunities that we actually saw during the pandemic. We actually did see attendance at like 504s and PPT meetings increase because parents were able to attend virtually from work. They didn't have to take a half a day or a full day off of work to go attend a meeting in school. So what the principals have been doing is offering the option to parents. You know, do you want to do a virtual meeting or do you want to do an in-person meeting? And that's worked out really well. We're getting more parents involved in that process as a result. We've also seen some schools are offering in-person and virtual PTA options, and they're getting more parent participation that way too. You know, it's great to see everybody in person, but there is a reality where we're all leading very busy lives. Can we get people involved in some such situation where it makes sense, get our families involved if it is virtually? And there's that balance, right? Some things you want in person and you want face-to-face, and some things are better off virtual.
Most important, we've learned over the past few years to be fluid and flexible, and to be very creative when we think about how to engage families, in addition to how we engage our students. But knowing that the flexibility is the key, and that there are some, and especially unique to our different communities, different school populations, there are some times where a virtual event makes a lot of sense and provides additional opportunities, and other times a more traditional in-person approach is really is what's needed in that moment. So we've learned that we just need to meet our families where they are. So if that means having an in-person event where then that's the way to go, or being flexible and offering a virtual option as well.
We've had to be responsive to family needs in a number of ways. When you think about the challenges of getting kids to school and different pandemic scenarios, and you know, we've had many instances where social workers or Mary Kate Williams have gone out to houses and talked to families about how they can get their students engaged and how we can help them engage in the school process, and help remove any barriers that are there. You know, I think we've all learned, like Dr. Gillespie said, I've never had an experience in my life over 2 years where you had to walk into every day being like, okay, so what's going to change today and how are we going to cope with it? And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think we've all had to do that over the last 2 years. And but you know, as long as we're being responsive to our family needs and our children's needs, I think that we're going to be just fine.
We've learned that we can, and we do it together in partnership.
So that's our report. If you guys have any questions or points of discussion, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for the information and for the report. Board members, questions? Ms. Ratner?
Thank you, Ms. Lane. I'm thrilled with the success and the flexibility of it all and how to make the responsiveness to the needs as they come up. I wondered if you could give an example when you talked about the revised morning meetings. Was it more a variety of questions by filling out the needs, or is it more of something that was set as a program, as well as the advisory lessons, how or what that was done in a different fashion during this time to get such great success?
Sure. So they were revised in two ways, the morning meetings. There was a technical piece, right? So the year before, we couldn't have students anywhere, like we didn't even want them moving around the room because it was so restricted. So this year, we could at least have students stand up around the perimeter of the room in a circle, because being in a circle is so much more communal than sitting in rows. So there was a technical change to that. But also, Students struggling with their emotions and feeling sad, bored, and anxious during that time, we wanted students to share about it. So usually when we're starting morning meeting in the beginning of the year, there's a lot of questions like, what's your favorite food, what's your favorite color, and that goes on for quite some time. And we did ask those questions, but we also started talking about feelings at a much earlier time. Giving kids a venue to express their feelings and in a safe place and being able to talk about them with their peers and their teacher. And we feel like that helped students cope with their emotions at that time.
Perfect, thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Great presentation. First question I have is, can you tell us a little more about what are trauma-informed practices? I'm familiar with them, but not very, very much. And then what about the professional learning that you offered on restorative practices and that aspect?
Sure. Trauma-informed practices is an extension of the work that we have done in restorative practices. It's almost a next level of work. And we spent a considerable amount of time with staff really reviewing what it means for students to have experienced quote-unquote trauma. And that it doesn't need to be necessarily something that you can see on the outside. And so we talked a lot about those adverse childhood experiences that we shared with the board earlier this year. And really a lot of the work that we shared with all of you earlier is the basis of that more intensive trauma-informed approach. It's about being aware that as having had a shared experience through the pandemic, to a degree, every child, every adult has experienced trauma. And that closes the window of tolerance and their ability to, under more typical circumstances, to be able to regulate their emotions. So trauma-informed practices are about how to anticipate and respond and really set up classrooms and school environments in a way that is setting our students up for success. And it's about knowing that response window is much narrower. And it applies to all of us too. So it had a dual purpose. It was very helpful for students, but it was also something that, and that's why we kept repeating and did different sessions with staff throughout the year, and then also embedded it into our content areas through the supervisor's work as well.
Yeah, technically trauma-informed practices are those in response to the adverse childhood experiences that we taught you guys about. And they're very specific, parent incarcerated, mental health, substance abuse. But there was a lot of research saying exactly what Dr. Gillespie said, that the current pandemic really was a form of trauma on everybody. So we thought that was a good fit. So we trained all of our social workers, psychologists, and school counselors on trauma-informed practices, and they in turn turnkeyed that and trained all the faculty so that they would know what to look out for. People have different emotions, and some are very typical and normal and healthy, and some are less so. So we wanted to make sure that teachers could identify and look for students who are struggling more than others.
Great, thank you.
And I know you also asked about restorative practices, and to partner with that, we offered the initial restorative practice trainings last summer for any staff who were new to the district who had not experienced the rollout several years prior, because that is more of the foundational work that we have throughout our schools. So those sessions were offered for anyone who was new to the district.
Great, thank you. And then one other question, summer school. Is the intention to continue with the 2-week plan for 6 weeks and anyone can go, or is it moving back to the model it was before the pandemic, and kind of where is that kind of going?
So we're offering a few different options, but the elementary summer school that I was talking about, the elementary academy, is moving back more towards an academic focus. Social is still important, but kids have had a lot more social opportunities this year than they did the year previously. And we feel it's important at this point to have that academic focus. So it's going to go back to a 5-week. There's still going to be social emotional learning. There's still going to be physical education. There's still going to be art in there. So it's not that social emotional is not going to be part of it. It is. Relationships first still is a mantra, but we need to shift a little bit more towards the academics, we feel, this summer.
And one of the things we instituted was you saw in some of the pictures, the high school mentors. which we're continuing this summer because it's such a valuable piece that's been added. So we're continuing that in the experience as well.
Okay, and so that means that students are selected through the school makes a recommendation for summer school versus any parent wanting to be able to go in as it was last summer? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. We're looking at the data and seeing which students might need a little more support this summer.
Great, thanks.
Other questions, Mr. Dion?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A couple comments and then a question. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your foresight in bringing the counselors forward. I think those are going to be invaluable resources, probably already are being invaluable resources. I'm grateful that the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Finance included that in the general fund this year as well, so that we can continue that program once the grant money runs out. As it relates back to the survey, I wanted to sort of, you mentioned that in 2020, the numbers have gone down since then on some of the questions to 2021, and you could presume that they would go down again in 2022 on certain questions. But I think it's really important that we continue to ask those questions, so that I hope that we will continue to ask those questions. And if we need to put in the other questions that we took out to include those in there. So I hope that you will do that. Is that the plan?
Yeah, so we haven't put it out yet because that's what we've been grappling with. Prior to the pandemic, we asked the same questions every year so we could measure how we were growing and doing. But it changed with the pandemic, so we needed information on certain things. But we've been asking ourselves the same questions. Given where we are right now, what are the appropriate questions? And you want to be able to look at this year compared to the year previous and say, how did we grow in that particular area? So yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of the typical questions and selected ones that are really going to give us information that we want from this past year as well.
And I was going to say, it's as if you were present at our earlier meeting, because that's exactly what we've been talking about. And that information, while many things have returned to more traditional, ways of doing things, we're still, this is still an ongoing evolution, and that information is still really important.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that, as you guys have mentioned it in previous meetings, we're going to have ripple effects of this for quite some time. So it's really important to measure that. So thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Ratner?
Excuse me, I forgot to ask in regards to the Wingman Program, could you give an example?
There are student wingmen who, they run all the wingman activities. They select them, they run them in their schools, in the middle schools. It was the first moments of students really expressing joy that I saw from the year, where even when there was still social distancing and masks, students leading each other in activities that focus on team building and on wellness was really powerful to see. So they would push in, they each had homerooms that they were assigned to, and they lead the activities for that group of students throughout the year. So they build relationships, and it's not necessarily older students working with younger students, it's a variety across our schools. So it's been incredibly positive, and we're looking forward to expanding for more students next year.
Yeah, it promotes student leadership and inclusion. And it helps everybody feel included and part of. Our fifth graders just went up to the middle school for like a school visit during the school day, and I know at least one, if not all, the schools did like these wingman games. They had to like sit in a circle and move cans with their feet, and they had a ball. They really enjoyed it.
Thank you for the great presentation.
I have a good friend whose daughter is in middle school, and she raves about the Wingman Program, and her daughter's really loves it, has been involved, and so I think it's a good addition.
Good.
Ms. Petrosky, do you have a question?
I just had a comment, really. Thank you for the presentation. It was really informative, and I think you put some great data points, and I loved the progression over time. It actually ends on a very hopeful note, right? So that was nice to see. That was just really, I just wanted to say thank you, really great job on that.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
I have one more question. So I think it's fantastic that we served almost 31,000 meals last summer in the summer of '21 over 4 weeks. I mean, that's almost 8,000 meals a week. is there a cliff that's going to occur when that funding stops this year? Because I'm pretty sure that program's not continuing. I mean, 32,000 meals is significant. It's half the population of the city. And food prices are more expensive, inflation, all of those issues haven't gone away. In fact, they've actually gotten worse in the last year. So kind of what can we do on the other end to support? I know we don't necessarily have a ton of money on the other side, and where is that kind of planning for the future?
Well, I think we talked about that with Ms. Faustich when she was before us, that it really is highly dependent on grant money. And that would need to be something we'd have to take back and create a huge plan with funding for, so.
No, I don't mean us as an individual, like, system taking on that cost and burden, because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
What my point is that there's going to be more families who probably need assistance on the other side. What do we have in place to help them on that side, assuming we don't have the funding and the system in place, is what I mean.
I can share a couple insights, which is that our school support staff try to do a very thorough job of being aware of families who are experiencing food insecurity. And there are efforts within our schools to provide additional assistance, to really reach out to community resources. We have Food to Kids that's in place as well, and so that's something that has always been a practice and will continue to be, especially as we transition.
We also have, I mentioned the Community Connection Center a couple of times, right? So that organization and the Family Resource Center are designed to help provide, not provide, but help be a link to wraparound services. So they do a lot of work identifying needs of families and helping them find ways to meet those needs. And we are lucky in Milford that we do have a lot of services that help support that, like Food to Kids. They feed a lot of, they provide a lot of meals throughout the school year.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? I just wanted to comment that I was glad to hear you acknowledge the benefits that, some of the benefits that the virtual piece have had. I think, while a lot of people don't like the virtual, you're not gonna please everybody all the time, but I personally see a lot of benefit in some of the positives that the process has allowed. So I'm glad to hear that you're at least embracing the option and acknowledging that it was good in some ways. It offered increased participation, and I think that's something that we should keep in mind, because I do believe that there's a lot of families that they're just stretched so thin. They have to choose what they're gonna participate in, and very often the school piece falls by the way. And if they have an option to stay at home with their kids right there and do something from their home, that they will take the choice to do it. So I'm glad to see that that's going to remain an option whenever you think you can do that. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for the presentation. I look forward to this one every year, so I look forward to you being back next year.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Next item is the capital improvement plan. Mr. Richitelli, Dr. Kataya.
Happy to have Mr. Riccitelli kick it off.
Good evening, members of the board. Traditionally, at the May meeting, administration presents to you the capital improvement plan, or the proposed capital improvement plan for your approval, which then goes to the city for inclusion in the city's capital improvement plan. I'll just take a couple of minutes. I know there are a few new board members who may not have been through this capital improvement process before. So I passed out just a quick, down and dirty description of what the capital improvement process is, and I'll just run through it very quickly. The one thing I will say is that when you look at the capital improvement plan, the actual line items, there's dollar amounts that are attached to it. And so sometimes this is confused with a capital improvement budget. And I really want to make that distinction. It's not a budget, it's a plan. It looks at the district from a 5-year perspective and even further out, and presents a snapshot of the needs of the district as we see them at this time. So the process itself, generally, items are in excess of $100,000. They're usually, they are not things that you would typically find in our general budget. So there's a big distinction between what's in our general budget and what's in the capital improvement plan. So as I said, usually at the May meeting, we present to you our proposals. Then from there, once your board approves it, it goes to the mayor with a request that he include it in his city capital improvement plan. From there, by state statute, it goes to the Planning and Zoning Board for their approval. That usually takes place in November. If the Planning and Zoning Board approves it, then it goes to the Finance Board in December, and then ultimately to the, the Finance Board in December and the Board of Aldermen in January for their approval of the plan. Now, up to that point, it still is just a conceptual plan. When it turns into actual projects is when the mayor decides what items the city can afford to actually undertake. And so after he receives the plan and receives all the approvals, he will look at the city's total economic financial picture and look at the needs of the city as a whole and see how our education projects fit into that total capital improvement plan for the city. And then he will make a recommendation to the Board of Finance. That usually takes place the last meeting in January, and then to the Board of Aldermen at the first meeting in February with the amount of money that he is proposing for bonding that will pay for the projects for that particular year. And then once the Board of Finance and Board of Aldermen approve it, then we have the money available to us to undertake those projects. The last thing I'll say about the capital improvement plan is there are some things that are reimbursable by the state of Connecticut, partial reimbursement. Milford's reimbursement rate right now is about 37.86, I believe, without looking at it here. Yep, 37.86. And that's for eligible expenses. And the state clearly spells out which things are eligible and which things are not. For instance, replacements of things such as boilers are not reimbursable. Athletic facilities are not reimbursable. But there are a tremendous amount of things that are reimbursable. So there are many things on here that the city is eligible for reimbursement. And if those projects go to the Permanent School Facilities Building Committee, which is a committee of the city, and if those projects are approved by the state of Connecticut for reimbursement, then the Permanent School Facilities Building Committee undertakes that project. Your board has some oversight over those projects. Obviously, the concept itself comes from your board, and you're asked to approve the educational specifications before the project starts. And then throughout the program, you're asked to approve the plans, specifications, and estimates. But primarily, the Permanent School Facilities Building Committee is the committee that oversees that with the help of design professionals, architects, and engineers. So with that, that's the process. And so with that context, I would ask you to take a look at the plan itself. And I'll start off by just saying that this is kind of a transition year for us from what we've traditionally thought of in the capital improvement plan and what we've traditionally recommended, which is buildings and facilities. Because of the age of our facilities, we need to constantly upkeep them. But now we really believe, and Dr. Kataya will elaborate on this, we really believe that some of that focus needs to shift to not just facility needs, but the ability of our capital improvement plan to meet the needs of our programs and our curriculum. So you'll see a shift with the traditional things that have been on this list this year, so it's a little bit different. The things that you will see that are on every year, the first two items, the miscellaneous HVAC, ventilation, boiler, and masonry improvements, that is proposed for each of the 5 years. In addition, the elementary playgrounds and playscape areas, those are recommended for each of the 5 years. And we've seen that the cost of replacement of playscapes and play areas has gotten too high for inclusion in your budget for a replacement cycle. And so we've now started a replacement cycle through the capital improvement plan. And the playscapes run anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000, depending on the size, the age, the handicapped accessibility equipment, and things like that. So those two things are on for each of the 5 years. Then in the 22-23 year, we'll skip down to where it says various schools installation of air conditioning. Your board last year introduced this item, and we've actually started. The mayor approved in the first year $1 million for for air conditioning and HVAC. And in addition, we reserved through the ARP, the COVID ARP grant, $1 million of the Board of Education's money, and the city has matched $1 million of the city's ARP money. So altogether in that pot, we've got about $3 million that we're starting some of those projects this summer. And that's ongoing in the capital improvement plan as well. There is legislation was approved in this past session up at the state that some of this work will become reimbursable by the state through the regular school construction grant program at the reimbursement rate that we have. But that's after all of the ESSER and ARP money has all been used for that purpose. There are other things on the list like roof replacements of certain roofs that are more than 20 years old and need to be replaced. We still have asbestos removal in some of our schools, very small percentage at this point, but we still do. So we continue to do that through the capital improvement plan. And one last item that I'll just bring your attention to before I turn it over to Dr. Kataya is in the 22-23 year, the last item, the Eels Hill Complex Steel Storage Building. That normally is at the very bottom of our list. It's traditionally been a low priority. But we moved it up this year because of really what we've learned through the pandemic is that we have a much greater need for storage, and not just storage, but a complete inventory management system from the time it's needed to the time it's purchased to where it's stocked and then going out to the schools. We can be much more efficient if we have this an inventory management plan for our purchases. We can buy in bulk and store things. We can do just in time. There's all kinds of things that we can do. And our immediate need now is storage of all of the desks, plexiglass, all the equipment that we have from the pandemic. We have very little storage. Our warehouse here in Parsons is very small. It's a very limited space. So we're not able to buy in bulk at all. Things come in and they go right out to the schools. And then the only other storage area that we have is at the now closed Simon Lake School, and that's filled to capacity. So at any rate, I took too long on an item, but we did move it up, and we do believe that it would help the district immensely with efficiency and cost. So I mentioned that to you. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gatayev to talk about some of the curricular needs.
So I want to call your attention to particularly year 22-23, and I think this year exemplifies the shift that Mr. Viccitelli is highlighting. Normally we propose renovation and upgrades of facilities primarily due to age. Pumpkin Delight definitely is an example of that, albeit we are putting into that school a more appropriate library media space, but it primarily has been to update old buildings. What we're finding now, and the shift that Mr. Viccitelli is referring to, is really considering a lens that is much more program and curricular based. And asking ourselves, what are the programs and implementation of curriculum that will be occurring in the future that is inhibited by our current facilities, or almost impossible in some cases. So for example, you'll see in the list, our tech ed facilities at the middle schools right now will not meet the need of the new programming we're going to be putting in place in the next couple of years. West Shore and East Shore are probably a little bit ahead in our ability to accommodate in those facilities, but we're still going to need very different space in order to consider STEM instruction as it is related to a career track, a career pathway. So we know that while we've just renovated East Shore and West Shore, we will need to go into those middle schools to upgrade those rooms in order to be much more aligned to the career path of tech ed, or STEM. We also want to provide an equitable opportunity at Jonathan Law for all those students who are interested in going into the field of working with young people. And we'd like to emulate what is at Foreign and create a child learning center at Law. Additionally, the high schools both have culinary spaces, but they sort of more look like our home kitchens. And what we really, if we're going to be serious about supporting students who are going into the field of the culinary field, we need professional grade kitchens. We don't need little microwaves and little stove tops that look like they're in my house, right? We need, like we're walking into Top Chef and giving them the best opportunity, and that's going to require some capital money. So you may be scratching your head saying, we're going to go into Foreign and renovate? Yes, we are. Because if you've been in Foreign's culinary program, it's a teeny tiny space, and it has student desks and chairs and little mini units with your mom's stovetop and oven. And that is not appropriate for a future if you want to be a chef. So in my mind, I envision Top Chef quality kitchens for our kids. So we have intentionally moved Harborside up on the list. This list looked different a year ago. Harborside was actually last on renovation. And there is a high priority in the area of programming and curriculum implementation, because we believe, we've talked to this board numerous times on our vision for middle school. We really want career path to start in 6th grade, so it's a 6-12 focus. We have revised, and we'll continue to revise the middle school schedule. Little teaser, next budget season, we're already working on increased electives, so students have more voice and choice at the middle school. Likely we'll be adding staffing at that level for that. Quite simply, Harborside's facility will not be able to meet the needs of the upcoming programming and curriculum implementation the way West Shore or East Shore could do. The facility will allow us to only deliver a program that will look different than East Shore and West Shore. And that's not what we want for our kids. So that is why we moved Harborside up. We believe it is the next priority school based on the programming and changes we're making. And if we want to make things a bit more equitable across the 3 middle schools, that would be my recommendation to this board. I will ask the question that you will probably ask me, well, how about Calf Pen and Live Oaks? Don't they have programming that may not be equitable? You know, when I start thinking about what we offer elementary kids, all 8, regardless of facility, could provide STEM. All 8 provide the social, emotional, mental health. We added the school counselors. There's sufficient programming there. The core curricular areas, literacy, math, social studies, science, those are all delivered within same spaces. They're not as different as they are at the middle and high school. The one glaring difference would be the library media space. Because what you see at Pumpkin, 2 classrooms as a space, is what you see at Calf Pen and Live Oaks. 2 classrooms with the wall knocked down. That's insufficient and inappropriate for the library program we have built. So that would be the standout issue at the elementary schools. But much more so is the standout issues at Harborside. It will really be a different middle school experience with our new programming at Harborside if we don't do something there first. So that's why I don't think we could wait 7 years to get to Harborside. So that is my recommendation, and as we met with Cabinet, particularly in teaching and learning and PPS, we believe that the board should consider moving Harborside up to next year. And what you can anticipate from us in future years as we get into the capital improvement plan is as we program and revise curriculum, we hope, just like the budget will align, and what this capital improvement plan will also align with those programming initiatives. So you should start to see some through line in, oh, we want to improve X, well, there's the money in capital, and there's the money in budget. So all of that should start to really triangulate. That was a lot, okay? So we'll stop talking if you want to ask us any questions.
Ms. Ratner, you had a question?
That's good. I remember Eels Hill, so I just want to go back a minute. I know we still own it. Is there a lot of tax to own that thing? That place?
Tax
The
dollars.
taxes, yearly taxes.
No. We don't pay taxes to the city, but actually the city owns it.
Oh, the city owns it.
They allowed us to
They
have,
allowed
for
you to use
those of you who don't know, Eels Hill is where the central offices for Milford Public Schools used to be, as well as some city offices. That closed when Parsons opened in 1986. But we still have the facilities up there. They're dilapidated and we don't use them, nor does the city. But it would be a perfect spot for
For storage, yes.
maintenance garage.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's great.
Ms. Doyle?
Where is Eels Hill? That was one of my.
Sure. New Haven Avenue, you're going New Haven Avenue toward West Haven, and you go by
It's a left turn.
what's the hot dog place on the left-hand side?
Dogtown.
Dogtown. Go past Dogtown, and it's a little bit further on the left-hand side. There's a street straight up, and it really is up on a hill.
Okay, so then the next, more comment than a question, is I fully support moving Harborside earlier in the system. After visiting Harborside, I didn't get to see West Shore renovated, but I lived in that area when it was being renovated and could see from just the outside the difference. I fully support moving up to the Harborside. There is a difference between the middle schools and the offerings that you can give from West Shore to Harborside, and from that at the elementary level, so much of it does occur within the classroom that I don't think it's gonna hurt to put it off for a few years. So I fully support moving Harborside up more.
Question, Ms. McDonough Souza?
Thank you. Can you just speak a little bit more to the potential inequitable programming in Harborside Middle School if we don't move it up?
Sure. I think glaringly, there is very limited facility space for tech ed.
Okay.
It sits in the basement, very small space, poor ventilation, not a lot of elbow room for kids to put their hands on technical equipment. The art spaces are just classrooms. There is no opportunity for multimedia experiences, not big fat sinks where you're engaging in possible like messy kind of art. So those are two examples. Music, a lot of music occurs on the stage or in converted closets. If you walked the basement of Harborside, I think more glaringly you will see that. And Harborside's Library and Media Center is really highly antiquated. It does not allow the elbow room for collaboration, it's not technology friendly, it's awkwardly laid out. It at one time was, stellar and forward thinking,
That's
but
why I'm like cracking up, because I was like, when I went to, I think I started at Harvard in '99, I was like, look at this cool media center, we can go through like the hallway, it's all glass. And
Still
I'm like,
looks the
wow.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
wow.
Banners in the cafeteria and all.
Yeah, 23 years ago, yeah, okay.
and in music and the arts, again, teaser, we'd really like to start to differentiate. It's not just general music, but there's like really cool options in music we can offer kids, but we need space for that. In art, it's not just general art, but how about some ceramics or watercolor or there's so many options that we really don't have these space. We have classrooms. What we did, we took classrooms and said, that's art and that's music. And facility-wise, it doesn't always meet the needs. Some of our science labs at Harborside are, antiquated. We need, if you walk into West Shore, East Shore, you'll see a significant difference on the lab sites, the tables that they have. They're collaboratively laid out with central equipment. So would there definitely be an impact? We would make it work, but the experience most definitely would be different.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Deanna?
Thank you. First of all, I definitely support moving Harborside up. We had the opportunity to walk through Harborside and West Shore. The difference is night and day. A number of us remarked that I think Harborside is almost 75 years old, which is quite old for a building. So I wanted to see, I like to move in the direction of thinking about programming before we do renovation. And I also want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of work done over the last 10 years renovating our schools, and many of them look very nice. And that decision to renovate instead of build new was sort of predates myself on the board, it predates your administration. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between the two. Obviously there's a significant financial difference, but outside of that, from a programming standpoint, what you might consider the difference between the two.
From a programming standpoint?
From any standpoint you'd like to take it.
I should have just left it as it was. First of all, I think we as a system, whether we were the individuals that made the decision or not, that's the systemic decision that was made. We're so far into it, it's not like we've only done 2 or 3 schools that way, we have 3 left, right? So I think finish and honor the decision of the boards prior, the administration prior, and finish it out at that point, would be my take on that. Second, a renovate to new gets you to a point where programmatically you're meeting the needs of kids. Even at Pumpkin, where you're really adding space there, At West Shore, we added space. So you still have the benefits of a new building, because you're dreaming and knocking down walls and extending the footprint. I think it is incredibly expensive. It would be a mind shift in any community to go from renovate to new to knock down and build new. And I'm not sure that we really have space options. I'm not sure, building a school is not like buying an acre and putting a house on it. Like, you need a lot of acreage. So I think we can get creative with Harborside. We've already had that dialogue with Mr. Gottlieb. We believe that we would need to extend the footprint there in the future. Of course, we'll let architects decide that. And we do also believe that we need to get to CAFPEN and Live Oaks for renovation. Programmatically, I think a renovate to new does the same thing as build a new building completely.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Other questions?
Can I ask
Yes.
a non-Harborside question?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you for the capital improvement process. It's very helpful. I thought I understood what you meant by 36.8% reimbursement rate. I thought that meant that's how much you were getting back. And then I heard something else you said, and I thought maybe it was more of a APR type of situation? Is it, can you just clarify that for me?
Sure. First of all, it has to be eligible, costs. So whatever eligible costs there are, for every dollar we spend, they give us back 37.86%. Once the project is complete. So the city bonds for the entire amount of the project. We build the project, and then the state will come in and audit and make sure everything's, where it's supposed to be, make sure that we spent it on eligible expenses, and then they reimburse the city that 37.86%.
So it has to stay at that number?
Well, the state changes it every year, and it's based upon a very complex formula. It's called the ANGLIC, which I don't even know what the acronym is, but it's a wealth measure. And it ranks all 169 towns according to a wealth measure. And then based upon that, the number one school receives 20%, and the 169th wealthiest or the poorest community in Connecticut gets 80%. So it ranges between 20 and 80% reimbursement, and it's based upon your wealth rank. And currently we're at 48 in the wealth rank of the 169 communities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So when a project is begun, and, handed over to the Permanent Schools Committee, do they have a sense as to which expenses within a project are reimbursable?
Yes.
So they can get a general idea, if it's a $1 million project, they know that, only 500,000 is reimbursable, so we'll get 37.86% of $500,000 when all is said and done.
Yes, once they hire a design professional, one of the requirements of any architect that we hire is that they're well versed in the state requirements and the percentage rates and everything else. So all of the budgeting that takes place includes what's eligible and what isn't.
And how often do they reassess the percentage?
Every year.
Every year?
Mhm.
Yes, Ms. Doyle?
One last question, and this is more for clarification for mostly in the future. So going forward with Harborside, doing the major renovation at Harborside, what generally besides increasing the footprint, would it be new windows, HVAC? Like what are usually the components that are included in these major renovations that are occurring within these schools?
Sure, I can. Well, at Harborside, we would look at the dedicated art and music space. We would look at the tech ed space. We would look at enhanced science labs as like the core of the project. And then in addition to that, we would upgrade laboratory facilities. We would upgrade electricity to the latest, most conservation measures, things like that. I mean, we go so far as the dollars will allow us to go. If you recall, part of the debate during the Pumpkin Delight project was whether we had enough money to air condition the whole building or not. So we look at, when we start out, we would love to do everything. But then we have to abide by the amount of money that's given to us by the city, and then the Permanent School Committee has to eventually, get down and sometimes eliminate things. But we try to update, all the code compliance stuff has to be done, the electricity, the plumbing, all those things. And we try and make the building look, try and make it look like new, with things like ceiling tiles and floor tiles and paint and things like that.
So you basically bring it up as most, so it removes the need for a renovation actually the next year. That would be the new tile in the room. You try and cut down on all those, make it even. And so, in theory, we're gonna use in theory, you don't need a renovation for the next 5 to 10 years
Or
within
more,
the school.
yeah.
Or more,
Yeah.
in any major sense of
You want
like.
to do as much as you can so you don't have to touch it anytime
Right,
soon.
and it's less expensive now
Right.
than it is in the future. And so you just maybe double check with what we talked about earlier with the air conditioning. The air conditioning is going to be reimbursable. Is that new air conditioning? Like that would be a new versus a refurbishment, or like how would that work with reimbursement with the legislation?
Yep, I'm not fully versed on what the legislation exactly says. but it ties into ventilation, exhaust systems, and air conditioning is a part of that. So we're not sure if it would be, if air conditioning on its own would be reimbursable. We just, none of the regulations have come out yet, it's just brand new legislation, just passed this session. So we don't know exactly what it's gonna entail, but it's around air quality, ventilation, exhaust, those types of things.
Well, I remember from visiting with the schools and seeing some of what's occurring in the classrooms and the creative use of the space and possible use of walls and worrying about ventilation and things like that. I know that that's a space that we want to move into more, focusing on having that adaptability and being able to make sure that the kids get what they need in the space that are there.
I just have a comment I want to make, and then I have a question. I think everybody needs to keep in the forefront that the capital improvement plan is a function of the city, and that the city kind of allocates the dollars. So when we get into these big projects, the city usually puts an upper limit on what the project can reach. Because it's bonded money, it adds to the city's debt service, and which is, something that the city has to consider. So it's not like we get what we ask for always. It's sometimes you have to make concessions, and everybody's got to, meet in the middle typically. Can you refresh my memory? I know that we had an initiative that lasted many years to put new windows in all of our schools. Did that include Harborside?
It did. Yeah, Harborside has new windows, new roof, so those things won't be part of this project.
Okay. Mr. Dion?
Just to follow up on your comment, Ms. Glennon, I think it absolutely does come to the city, obviously, that's how the process works. I think it's incumbent, it's my own personal opinion, it's incumbent on this board to do exactly what we think is needed, whatever that number is. Whatever administration proposes the number is, it's incumbent on us to support that and support the programs and the spaces that we have. And let the city decide. Let the city decide whether they have the money or don't have the money. I think it's very important that we keep that in mind as we go through these discussions, budget-wise and also capital improvement plan-wise. Because from my perspective, it's our job to concern ourselves with our stakeholders, which are students, staff, administration, families. And the city has other stakeholders that they have to keep in mind. So just wanted to share that perspective.
Yep,
It's
I don't
slightly
disagree at all. I mean, it's a philosophy I've expressed every year when we do the budget, but we also have our experts in Dr. Kutaya and staff that we rely on to tell us what they feel the school district needs. So I think that's another important piece of the consideration too.
Yeah, particularly in capital improvement, we do that. We bring to the city, this is what we believe we need, and we won't get this whole list.
No, I'm sure.
But it's our job to communicate that these are our needs. And we're grateful for whatever the city gives us.
Correct,
This is really a huge resource that they give us. And then depending on what is given to the school district, then we go back and revise and reprioritize the list. So that's why, you see $26 million on there for Harborside. That's a big number. Probably won't get that, but we're asking. So I agree, Ms. Glenn and Mr. DeYoung, that is our responsibility. But you always have to have a prioritized list. You can't ask for everything. That just doesn't exist in life. So we judiciously identify priorities each year and come in with what we believe is fair.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion, Ms. Trustee?
June, I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the 2023 through 2027 capital improvement plan as recommended by the administration and forward the plan to the mayor for consideration and funding.
Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Fowler. Any further discussion? I appreciate the robust discussion that we've had this evening on this. Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Move on to first readings of policy.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. We do have a first read, so please forward lots of questions. There are some very dense policies in this round. So let's go to 6141.51. Dr. Fettigan and I will review this with you. This is a newly required policy, actually, coming out of recent legislation, and we do have a deadline on this one, so we do need to go ahead and pass this by July 1st. This focuses on the advanced courses or programs, eligibility criteria for enrollment. And the essence of this policy really from the state is to provide equitable access to rigorous content and coursework for all students. And really opening it up wide and making sure that school systems are creating conditions and a culture that support all young people to access advanced placement coursework. So you will see throughout the policy definitions of what is advanced coursework. You'll see throughout the policy what does it mean for students to participate, what does the school district need to do in order to create that condition. It gives some definitions on remote and online learning, which is also related to a policy later this evening. And then also requires the superintendent to ensure that there is an evaluation process on an annual basis to make sure that we are allowing an increased access for all students to advanced coursework. Would you add anything, Dr. Fettigan?
Thank you, Dr. Patel. One thing that I would add is that a major area of focus in this policy, while we primarily think of advanced courses or programs taking place in the high school with students in grades 9 through 12, there's a large focus on this policy of thinking about how to open the dialogue to that access when students are in middle school. And that's where we believe our school counselors, the addition of the 3 additional school counselors in our middle schools, can help really support that idea of career exploration and career orientation and pathways towards learning to support student interest in their study. So that's another important piece of this policy.
That's all we have to share.
So this policy kind of, in my head, codifies the direction the district has been taking for many, many, many years then.
Yes.
So, okay.
It's very much in line with our vision of the learner.
Ms. Ratner?
In lieu of the wonderful letter that Dr. Patel and Dr. Fettigan wrote to the CSDE in regards to remote learning and distance learning, I'm confused of how we can meet everybody's needs if we don't have that, because they didn't answer the letter yet, right, for the new law?
Are you talking about hybrid?
Yeah.
So, we didn't write that,
Okay.
just to clarify.
I'm sorry.
CAPS did, our association.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So that prevents a hybrid learning model. It does not prevent remote learning.
Okay, got it. I think I misunderstood. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
And that starts in 23-24.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
Just 2 little things. I feel that the definition should be at the top because that seems to be consistent with what we've done in other policies.
I don't think so, right? Don't we usually have an introduction?
Yes, we do normally have an introduction.
Oh, it just feels like that introduction is much longer than.
It is long. This is a long introduction, but.
So then, fine. And then just the only thing is the district.
We have a lot to say.
For the district, do you mean Milford Public Schools by district?
In the second paragraph?
Yes.
Yes. So that should be, right there, we should start the first time saying Milford Public Schools in the district.
Other than that, I have no comments.
I had a couple of things. On page 2 of 3, the 4th bullet didn't make sense to me. Regularly evaluate technology that supports the learning goals can enhances the learning experience.
We'll
And
reword that.
the word should be "and," right?
And
Regularly evaluate technology that supports the learning goals and enhances the learning experience.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to note, there's in some of the other policies that exact same language, so it needs to be consistent throughout all of these 3 policies that, see this one, graduation requirements, and
what in particular, Ms. Glennon?
these bullets appear in one of the other policies.
6172.
It's in remote, I think.
Right, and then in the evaluation piece, the third and the fifth bullet, the word "and" at the end, I think can be taken out. It's, I'm not sure why that's there.
Yeah.
Were there any other? Ms. McDonough Souza?
Yes, just under evaluation, the first sentence, I think that should be a period instead of a comma at the end of in advanced courses or programs, period. And then should be a new sentence, right? The data shall be disaggregated.
Ms. Petrosky?
I just had one other thing here. In the second paragraph,
On which page?
on page 1 of 3, it basically says encourages students to pursue rigorous, challenging academic coursework, which is the definition of advanced course or program.
I'm sorry,
So when I look at the sentence, the district encourages students to pursue rigorous, challenging academic coursework such as, but not limited to, honors classes, dual enrollment, dual credit, and advanced placement classes.
Mm-hmm.
That is the definition of advanced course or program as honors class, advanced placement class, dual enrollment, dual credit, early college or university, other advanced accelerated course. So I'm just wondering if we can shorten that a little bit. It seems like it's redundant.
okay.
Personally, I think it's important, though, that we make the statement that we do encourage this, so.
Yes, but encourage advanced course or programs maybe instead of the whole definition over again.
Well, it's not actually the whole definition, it's part of it, because the whole definition includes early college or university or any other advanced or accelerated course or program offered.
Okay.
So, I think that was just, the function of that sentence was just to give some examples, but we don't have to. If you end it at the end of challenging academic coursework,
Period, right.
what,
Oh, yeah.
but that actually is not the same as the definition on the next page, because we're defining advanced course or program. It's not challenging academic coursework.
I think that sentence should stay, only because what may be challenging academic coursework may not, for a lower level student may not be a honors class, it might just be the next level up, so it encourages rigorous, challenging academic work for all students, not just those who are of the advanced courses in my mind, but they can include that. I think it's just more inclusive.
That was my actual
Okay.
thinking as well, that it's an important sentence as it stands. Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Just two grammatical things that I noticed. One, the final sentence in paragraph 2 on the first page of this policy reads a little bit too long. I'm wondering if we could break it up. After counseling will be provided to the students about the benefits of advanced level courses and programs, period, and then the district, and district needs to be capitalized, but those are the only, because I just thought that final sentence ran a bit too long.
I think that
So just for clarity, yep.
Can we just go back to the first sentence for a minute? I just want to get a sense from the board whether they feel that the sentence as it is should stand, or if it should be abbreviated, as Ms. Petrosky thought.
I mean, I think it's fine as is right now.
I think it should stand.
Okay, we'll leave it in, object to that, okay. Any other questions or concerns on this policy?
Actually, sorry, one more
Yep.
thing.
Mhm.
In the third paragraph, that starts with advanced courses or programs. Again, I think it reads a little bit too long. There's like 2 ands. I think maybe you should stop at board policies and state standards, period. And then this policy must be in accordance with Connecticut State Education. Yada yada.
I'll add yada yada.
Yeah.
Confusing when we were revising it.
New word, should we define that?
Definition, yada yada. Seinfeld,
You can hear me your definition of that, yeah.
Any comments? Okay, then we'll bring this back for a second reading and adoption. Remember, Ms. Dr. Kutai indicated that it's important that we adopt this policy at the next meeting.
6146, graduation requirements, there is a required change. Again, by July 1st, we have a couple of those in this packet. And on page 2, you will see the addition of students being able to earn credit for remote and online learning. That is language that comes to us through legislation, and that is the primary change that has been made in this policy. Right, Dr. Becker?
Correct, so this policy was recently revised by the board in 2019. So it's a fairly current policy, and at that time, it was to address the changing graduation requirements for the class of 2023 and beyond. And so as Dr. Butaya indicated, we've tried to present these policies almost together like in a suite, because one has really to do with the other, and there's some reference in each one, so they should come together before you. The other piece that's just important for the board to pay attention to is, again, this policy is, again, it's critically important that we have our school counselors to help support the programming, right, for students as they're approaching graduation requirements, because it's not just the number of credits, but really the distribution of the credit requirements that we need to be paying very close attention to ensure that our learners are ready for college and career. And the other piece that I know Dr. Kutai and I would want to draw everyone's attention to is the idea of the student success plans. And that will be a very important part of our comprehensive school counseling program, where every student in grades 6 through 12 inclusive, effective this July, will need to have a student success plan, and we'll be sharing with the board more, I'm sure, in the year ahead about what those look and sound like. But that's really to make sure that every student has a plan and a program for their course of study in grades 6 through 12. So that's something that's important to draw your attention to. And again, the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy is something that we're very proud of as a school system.
But not changed.
But not changed.
So let's just focus on the reds, right?
Right, but just another, important thing to draw your attention to. But that is not a new change, just additional work of our system now, let's focus.
But while I did just hear you say focus on the reds, but I have a couple of blacks that I wanted to bring up. On page 1, so for instance, where it says graduating class of 2023, beginning with the incoming grade 9 class, can that be changed now, since we're like, graduating class of 2023 I think should stay, but can we strike beginning with the incoming grade 9 class of the school year 2019-20? Can we strike that at this point? Since it's, you might want to leave graduating class of 2023
Yep.
and each graduating class thereafter, for instance. Let's see. On page 2, this, okay, I just wanted to verify, the second paragraph, a credit shall consist of not less than the equivalent of so typical is struck and it's replaced with class. Is that a new change, or is that an old change that was never taken out when we published the policy? I wonder, so if you could just clean that up.
That should be red.
Okay.
That should be red.
The third paragraph, the second line, I think I saw a couple of spots where it didn't say remote/online learning. It might just say remote, or it might just say online, so I didn't know if.
It should be consistent.
Okay, so I think there was
There's one under E.
the second line.
We'll look for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Griffin could make a note for herself.
And then the page 3, the third bullet is a little clunky. Actually, well, I wondered if, grammatically they're not really correct. So if we said E, the courses, semicolon,
Yeah.
are taught by teachers, are offered by institutions.
Needs a verb.
And then the third bullet needs to be just cleaned up. It's
It
very
needs a verb.
clunky.
Maybe just our meeting.
Are,
That the courses are meeting,
Or
just take out
working
towards.
toward meeting. We'll fix
But the whole, when you read through the whole thing, I just found the
Yeah.
whole thing to be very clunky, so,
The third bullet?
yeah. I mean, it's grammatically not correct, but at the beginning, but it also, are meeting the high school graduation requirements upon the successful completion of the board examination series permitting students in grade 9 through 12 to substitute achievement of a passing score on a series of examinations approved by the State Board of Education for meeting credit requirements for graduation. I don't know if it can be cleaned up at all. If you can't, it can't, but,
We'll see if we can.
and then, let's see. In the second, I just am wondering in the, under item 4, in the second, the last sentence in the second paragraph where you added parent, is it parent/student handbook, or is it just, is that what it's called, the parent-student handbook?
There's a slash, right?
I would want to just reference that to see how it appears online.
Whatever it's
But we'll
actually
take-
called,
yeah,
I just
Maybe
don't
it
know.
would be an and or.
right.
And then on page 5 of 6, can we delete, again there, commencing with the class, under the bioliteracy, commencing with the graduating class of 2018?
Yeah.
If that can be deleted. Anybody have any? Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. In the introduction, second paragraph, after April 1st in any school year, I think it would be just number 1. Not just for, or is it the first day in April, or like some, I don't know, I just thought that maybe should be changed, and just one.
I'm sorry, wait. What did you say?
Oh, in the second paragraph under the introduction, it says April 1st, but it writes out first.
Oh, okay, so
So with the numeral.
Yeah, just the new, and then, as more of a comment, I guess, or a question, there's under section 9, awarding of diplomas, it talks about, awarding, diplomas to
Section 9.
honorably, just discharged veterans from World War II in Korea. I'm just wondering, should Vietnam or any other conflict be included in that section as well? Or, I know people from World War II are probably like 90 right now, but I mean, just, if those two are in there, should,
We'll take a look at what,
yeah, I just,
is it the desire of the board to add?
I thought that
was
was
just curious.
I thought that was state legislated,
That's state okay, I didn't know, I was just confused, okay.
that it's just those two. But I would say if the state legislation has been changed to add other,
We of course would
conflicts,
be responsive.
right, then,
We haven't been notified of that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that just struck out.
I
Out to
wondered
me.
the same thing about,
Yeah.
are there anybody the same? Those diplomas? Any other questions?
I mean, I'm assuming these graduations are related to being conscripted in those wars, and that's why they left high school, because
Right, I mean, Vietnam, we still had some of that, but that's why it was a little bit
It
an
seems-
outlier.
but-
Yeah,
if it's gotta be there, it's gotta be there.
We will look at it.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none.
Okay. The 6146.3 will be rescinded. We believe that some of that is really covered in other policies.
Okay,
Okay. 6172, another required by July 1st policy. This is very specifically based on lessons learned through the pandemic and what the State Department would like us to do starting July 1st, actually. And allows a framework for what is remote learning, how should students and staff engage in remote learning, and also provides the guidelines for earning credit for remote learning. So as, I like the word that Dr. Fettigan used, the suite will we went from the first policy that was on advanced courses to graduation to online learning. Those all have some now new threads that connect them. So this is common language to the, that you may find in the other two. Not redundant, but supportive.
I had wondered if, in the very first sentence, if the Milford Board of Education should be actually left in there, because it talks about a shared commitment. So the Milford Board of Education, parentheses, Board, and Milford Public Schools District believes that in our shared commitment to meeting the needs of all learners, we must recognize the value and importance of in-person learning. I wasn't sure why it had been taken out.
Okay.
And there's a word missing, the in.
Yep.
And then Ms. Griffin just mentioned that she has that correction in the, that fourth bullet at the end of the first page. On page 3, in item A, the workload required by the, should be remote online courses, so if you look through, and again in C, so if you look through,
We'll do a review.
find wherever it says online and remote. And then these are the same, the 3 bullets under D, that's the exact same thing that was in the prior policy. So it should be consistent amongst them both. I had a question that, so am I to understand on page 4, the very first bullet, so you're going to have to develop regulations that will identify the maximum number of academic credits that may be applied towards graduation requirements. So do you have an idea of what that might be? I mean, will the student be allowed to take all of their all of their credits remotely?
We would not start there, no. And I don't know that we'll ever get there. I think at our core, we believe that learning is social. There may be instances and allowances in the future, but I think there are limitations that we, in guidance, will receive from the state.
Right, okay. All right, questions from board members? Mr. Dion?
Thank you. Long before remote learning was an accepted practice in secondary education, primary and secondary education, I think actually even this board had asked questions, not this board, a previous board, had asked questions about the potential of allowing students who, say, are enrolled at law participating in a class at foreign and vice versa if there wasn't enough enrollment in a particular subject area. At the time, it was unheard of, and never got much past the discussion stage. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that, and if there would be plans to allow that, or not.
We would love to do that, but unfortunately, the current legislation that was just passed, starting in '23, it disallows a hybrid. So if you have a teacher at foreign that has 4 kids in the classroom, and there are 2 kids at law that want to take that class, and we don't have enough at law to run it, you can't remote in those 2 kids when there are 4 kids sitting in front of a teacher. The law that was just, legislation that was just passed disallows, that's what Ms. Ratner was talking about, the hybrid nature.
That was the nature of the letter that you sent
Yep.
to us, yeah. So if the class was fully remote, it could be done,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Okay.
Is
But you still need somebody
To teach it, sure.
so that's interesting, right? In room 100, we put the teacher. In room 101, we put the kids with a paraprofessional to watch them. And in room 102 over at law, you have kids with a paraprofessional to watch them. That's what the law has done.
Yeah.
So actually, there was many years ago, there were instances where we tried to do exactly that. We're having, you didn't have foreign language, I think was one of them, where the kids from foreign and law would participate in the same class. You know, the teacher would be at one school. There were, I'm trying to remember why it just didn't work. I mean, I think the technology wasn't there. I mean, we're going back a long time. The technology wasn't there. There were, you know, I think that was probably the biggest challenge, was the technology and not having, you know, how do you, they, for some reason, couldn't figure out how to supervise the kids that were in one school when the teacher was with the other kids.
Well, it becomes more expensive this model, right?
Yeah, I
So
think
now
we've
I need
come,
two
right, I
paraprofessionals
think
watching
we've come
kids.
we've come a long way with the technology, I think, is, but it has been tried. I guess that's my point, is it has been tried in the past, before the legislation prohibited it. So I think,
We're in a, I'm sorry to interrupt you, we're in a somewhat unique situation, right? We have 2 high schools, not many communities have the 2 high schools. So,
There's some, yeah.
no, I know there's some, but I mean, not as many as don't.
I don't know that we've ever actually studied that. I mean, I don't know that you can make that comment. I don't know that we've.
Okay,
actually
well,
in
we're
our
in
case-
in our case, okay, fair enough,
In
in our case, we have 2 high schools. So is there a world in which you could foresee us petitioning the state for an exemption to that rule, so that we could follow through on a potential desire to do that?
I think the hope is that they change the legislation.
We're working on, there are mountains of politics that
Oh, I'm
surround
sure,
us.
oh, I'm sure.
What's the reasoning for it, that they passed that?
I think it was tacked on.
So
as an
we probably
amendment
shouldn't
that a
talk
lot-
about this here
Yeah.
with this policy right now. But I don't know how we went down that road. That's way off the path. But if you want to talk about that, if it's an item, we can certainly get into it. But we would like to, Mr. DeYoung, expand our offerings to young people across the district and not by the 4 walls that surround them. So that was our vision. Particularly, world language is a perfect example of that. And then if you start thinking about even what I said at the Board of Aldermen recently, the more voice and choice you give and the more personalized you provide programming, you have potentially smaller number of students taking advantage of that. But you don't want to say no to those kids, because that may be their career, right? So an electronic option is a really great solution to that. But it can be expensive, and now that we have some legislation around it, can be prohibitive. So yes is the answer. We'd like to explore that.
Okay.
Simply.
And
Fair enough.
I would just add on, you know, historically, I think when we originally had the online learning policy in the district, the intent and spirit was really to provide for an accommodation for, you know, staffing, right? You want to provide the experience for students across the high schools. But this new remote and online learning guidance from the state expands the intentionality and the spirit of why, as a school system, we would want to be really implementing a policy such as this, because it's really about everything that Dr. Katai was just saying, like accelerating learning, providing equitable access. You know, it's not just the staffing and the FTE piece. It's about developing the powerful pathways for our kids. There's a lot more intentionality that's brought forward with the policy now with this revision than what we're talking about 15, 20 years ago.
And I think we should not even consider, just get landlocked on the border of Milford. So there's some agencies that are saying, hey, we'll bring this together and offer it remotely for you. And we can buy into that, and we can now, with a policy, give kids credit that will count toward graduation for that participation. So it doesn't even have to be Milford run. And there are some agencies already working on that to offer some things starting in September. We probably won't be ready for that, but yeah,
on our
we'll get there.
And kids would take those classes that you're talking about during their school day, or that would be at night?
So both is an option,
Right.
right? So our kids who max out their schedules could, if, depending on their capacity, do an evening or weekend work, right?
Okay, that's great.
If we don't start thinking like that, some private business will start doing that for our kids,
Oh, sure.
right? So we can't think school hours, we can't think school walls, city, geographic borders, like, so if we wanna think forward, we now have to start making plans that potentially could launch in a few years to get to that.
Right.
Ms. Doyle?
I have a question. Honestly, I do think that there's an option for asynchronous online learning for
Yes.
students.
Which is the night weekend thing.
Yeah, or just, you don't have a time, you just have to do your assignments.
Right.
I do have a question about the introduction in this one.
There's a theme here.
There is indeed. Just looking at the chain of command almost is the like, I know Ms. Lennon talked about the Milford Board of Education and Milford Public Schools district beliefs. So in the second paragraph, it says the district authorizes remote learning as an option for students. Does the board need to authorize the district to allow that? Or is it the district, which I don't know, that, because.
It's
all
really
the-
this policy that authorizes it.
Right, the
why?
policy authorizes it that comes from the board,
Yeah,
so I don't think,
I think we need to change that.
yeah, changing some of that language in that first introduction paragraph, I think just,
I think it's the board.
It should say the board authorizes
Right.
remote
It's
online
based
learning.
on law.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then even there that the Milford Board of Education, I don't even think that Milford Public Schools district believes should be, I think it should be our commitment, believes that has a commitment to meeting the needs of all learners, because it comes from the board towards the district.
So, going back to patterns of introductions, it usually is a belief statement that comes from the Board of Ed.
Right,
The
that's
Board
what
of Ed believes,
right,
the Board of Ed supports, the Board of Ed is committed, right? And then the district will.
right, exactly. So I think that should change to the Milford Board of Education board believes in our commitment to meeting the needs of all learners. We must recognize value. The board recognizes X
Mhm.
in changing those.
Okay. Any other comments from board members? Ms. McDonough Souza?
Thank you. I don't think this was mentioned before. So just a couple little things. I think that definition, we don't usually have the colon after definition, and that definition itself should be, I think we usually bold it as a header. And then, for the actual definition, and I actually didn't cross-reference to see if this had been done in, for this previous definition and previous policy, but it seems like we're either missing a colon at the end of the term remote online learning, or I don't know if we usually do it like in a narrative format, which would be,
It's a lowercase a on the other page.
Yeah. It's meant to be part of the sentence, I think, right?
yeah, I don't know, yeah. In which case it should be remote online learning, comma, lowercase a as defined in state law, comma, and then
Is-
cross out, yeah,
Is instruction.
is instruction by means of.
Yep.
Right, and then similarly, I think that if that's the only term that's being defined there, then the next, after, that last bullet point, which I believe ends that definition, that we should have a new heading before we get into attendance of students, unless that's part of that definition, but I don't believe it is, because that definition appears in another policy and it doesn't go into that, so I don't know what the new heading should be, but I would suggest that for ease of reading purposes,
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the policy? Okay, I see none.
Okay, we will go into 6153.2. Mr. Vigitelli is going to take the use of personal automobiles.
So, we're changing very little in here. This policy was adopted in March of 1993, and I'm happy to say that it's stood the test of time, because we do exactly what the policy says, but we just made a few little minor changes. We crossed out in the second bullet, or second line down, use of private automobiles on school trips, because it was just redundant and was stated up above the first paragraph. And then we named the form, we actually have a form for verification of liability insurance, so that's listed. And in the last section, we just referenced the emergency transportation policy that the board has, which is 3541.44. Other than that, the policy remains the same, and it is what we actually do.
Questions from board members? Does this happen often? That
No, not often,
makes
but,
me very nervous, this policy.
We don't encourage it.
right, we don't encourage it at all, but there are, from time to time, there are, small groups of students
Yeah.
that are going on a trip for a
Okay.
particular reason, that it just doesn't make sense to have a bus in some cases.
Ms. Doyle?
I just have one question. On section, on 8, it says, if only one student is involved, the second responsible adult must be present on the trip, except in emergencies with the permission of the principal and/or parents.
Right.
Does it, which do you usually do, or do you want, does it need to be and, is it more frequently and, or is it more frequently or? Or do we want to have one for the other?
Yeah, more frequently, or
Yeah.
this very rarely ever happens. As a matter of fact, I don't remember it ever happening.
Okay. And it has the emergency portion, so.
Right.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, I see none.
That's all in policy work tonight.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
See, we have no members of the public here, so we'll dispense with public comment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there anybody opposed to adjournment? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 9:07. Thank you, board members.
I see.
All right. Yes. So we could keep it up.
I'm gonna remember that,
It's like
Andy.
YouTube.
Yada, yada.
Yeah.
That might be inappropriate.